Locked on Lakers for Tuesday. Andy Kamenetsky here. Another 24 hours worth of dust has settled since the latest batch of drama involving Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and the Lakers. Has there been any clarity gained? I'll talk about that, plus a whole lot more with Alex Regla from the Silver Screen and Roll Network coming up next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts. Always free, never behind a paywall. Make another Locked On show your second listen as long as ours remains the first. Them's the rules. Also, subscribe to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel where you get podcasts often early. You get breaking news, fun memes, all that stuff. And because there is no such thing as too much Lakers coverage, check out the work over at Silver Screen and Roll, particularly the work from my guest today, Alex Regla. Alex's articles for the network, always really insightful. His podcast, Talk Tuesday, runs, as one would guess, on Tuesday. He is sitting in for Brian today, who is on a vacation with his family. You are a much more, I'll just say it, handsome version of Brian in there today. You got this mustache. How long have you been working on that mustache?
I guess about 2 months now. Went from the beard to the mustache, and the LA Valley weather just kind of dictates the less hair, the better. So
I'll tell you, man, timing is everything. If you had that mustache in the LA Valley in like 1978, ooh boy, man. Let's just say you'd be getting some attention.
Really? Okay.
It's just, look up San Fernando Valley 1978 porn, and you'll see exactly,
like Boogie Nights
what I'm talking
stuff
about.
like that.
So Alex, on Monday's show page for the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, we had a great comment from Adam Smith 1776. Quote, lesson to be learned for LeBron James. Don't pick teammates over dinner while drinking lots of wine. And it seems like that is something LeBron should have recognized perhaps before the big summit about a year ago this time, where LeBron, AD, Russ went up in the great glass elevator in LeBron's house. I don't know how many floors, had that big dinner, a lot of wine, presumably, a lot of Lobos tequila, presumably, and decided they wanted to play together. Cut to a year later. It has gone rather poorly. The latest incident would be the fallout from Russell Westbrook and his longtime agent, Thad Foucher or Foucher?
Yeah, something like that.
Splitting ways with his agent, leaving a statement. Pretty crazy. I've never seen anything quite like that before. And first of all, I guess there was the tweet and retweet from Rich Paul and then LeBron, cold game, LeBron agreeing with that. That felt to both of us like, if not flat out trolling of Russ, certainly a bit of snark towards the situation. Did you see it the same way? And what do you make of, it seems to me like LeBron exacerbating the situation, or it seems like he's going out of his way to do it.
Yeah, LeBron's a smart guy. He's very online. He knows when things are going on, when to kind of jump in and throw his 2 cents on any situation. So yeah, the timing definitely kind of states that, or at least feels like he was commenting on that. I'm just not sure which side they were, like if that was a troll job against Russ or if it was against the agent. Like maybe Rich Paul didn't like how a fellow colleague treated a player, and this may be LeBron and Rich Paul trying to get ahead of things and saying, look, if Russ gets traded, we didn't push him out. Like, it's not on us. We're not forcing that hand. So I kind of read it both ways.
That's an interesting interpretation, because there had been, we're seeing a lot of this actually, because, you got the people close to Kyrie, leaking out, hey, look, we opted in to stay in. If the Nets want to trade Kyrie, that's not on us. We opted in to be a Net. We put out that statement to Shams that, I've opted in. I'm done talking for the summer, that sort of thing. If Brooklyn decides to move Kyrie, there's nothing we can do about that. That's actually, I had not thought of that read before, like the idea of LeBron and Rich Paul and just sort of Team Clutch separating themselves a bit from this, just because they know they're always going to be scrutinized with this. And LeBron knows, and sometimes I think pushes the narrative, sometimes pulls back from it depending on the situation, but he knows he's known as Le GM and that he's the guy shaping all these rosters.
Yeah, there was enough reporting like post Russell Westbrook trade throughout the season, mid-season, that there was kind of some like rifts within the organization. If it was LeBron and AD who really pushed for the Westbrook thing, where others in the organization might have pushed for a different trade. And a lot of people think that was a LeBron call or AD call. And so maybe, again, that goes back to, hey, we didn't do that. We also aren't asking him to be traded, even though most likely they are. And this is all just people posturing and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just never a dull day when it comes to these types of things.
I'm trying to figure out exactly, especially now, because you gave me something to think about in terms of the idea of that tweet being more separation than pressure. How far do you think LeBron can go actually in trying to pressure this sort of thing? Because I think alienating Russ, which if nothing else, it seemed like was going on in Vegas during Summer League, with the two of them not talking at all in full view of everybody, which they both know is going to be a story. Like, on one hand, it could feel like LeBron trying to apply the same pressure that he did with the front office to get Anthony Davis. But to me, the difference is the Lakers had stuff that New Orleans would want, and the Lakers don't here with Russ, and they have a limited amount of picks. And, if Brooklyn is really waiting this thing out for KD clarity, I actually don't know if the Lakers can make a deal or make an offer for Kyrie that they take right now. So my biggest concern, I'd love to hear from you about this, is just the idea that LeBron is actually exacerbating a situation that is more likely to end up with Russ on the team and tension than Russ on another team because LeBron applied that pressure.
So you're saying it's been like counterproductive, that his actions so far have made it actually harder to make that trade? Yeah, like I think anytime you kind of voice your opinion in any way, right? Either literally you're on Twitter saying something, or just with your body motions or you things you like at Summer League, and it's next to each other, you're kind of throwing a little bit of kind of dirt in other GMs' favors, where they can kind of use that as leverage. Because this whole thing with the whole Russ thing, like every new report we hear every day, every little tweet, every little like on Twitter, anything, is just used as like a leverage game where other GMs could use that, saying like, hey, we know LeBron has an extension coming up in August. Like, you probably want to get this done to please him. Like, so you're going to have to pay up now. Or they can be like, hey, this thing just leaked with Russ's agent to Woj. That doesn't look good. Like, all this is just stuff other GMs can use. So maybe the best bet, if LeBron really wants Russ out, is kind of just to take a step back and be a little quiet about it. But that's just not how LeBron operates.
No, it has not traditionally been his MO in these type of situations. Coming up, I want to talk with you a little bit more, Alex, about the Russ end of this and the stuff with his agent, because there was a really good piece by Jovan Buha, friend of the show, on The Athletic, just more perspective on the two of them splitting up and what it meant for the Lakers, and just really how unprecedented a situation like this is, both in a split up like this, but also just the effect on Russ and his perception. So we'll talk about that coming up next. Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Okay, the Built Bar bakers / scientists / geniuses over at the factory, they never stop finding new ways to spin forward their creation. They took the instant classic, the coconut brownie chunk, added some marshmallows, and created, boom, the coconut brownie chunk puff. It is the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar that you love, but marshmallow added, always covered in 100% real chocolate, a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness, but good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein. And as always, it is made with the collagen protein. That is the good stuff. It is what your body absorbs more efficiently. It has tons of health benefits. It is great if you need a quick snack, just you got a craving and you need to satisfy it. Again, go to the coconut brownie chunk puff. It is only available for a limited amount of time. Go to built.com right now. Make sure you don't miss out. Order a box of it. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKed15, 15% off at built.com. So, Alex, I mentioned like this just being really a strange situation with Russell Westbrook and, this agent who's been with him since he entered the draft. And they are, by all accounts, have been extremely close. And there's a really interesting line, a few interesting parts from this piece from Jovan that I thought stood out. One, quote, "This is an unprecedented level of tea spilling from an agent in real time. It clearly speaks to a troubling dynamic behind the scenes as the partnership evidently soured to the point that Foucher felt the need to get ahead of the report and publicly defend himself. According to league sources, the split caught several people around the Lakers off guard." What do you make of this coming as a surprise to people, even with everybody knowing there's a lot of tension right now between Russ and the Lakers?
Yeah, like I don't think anybody could have predicted this because it's rare. Like I can't think of another instance where an agent has, knowing they're about to be fired or let go or whatever, gets ahead of it and leaks this to Woj of all people, and is pretty detailed the reasons why that they're going their separate ways, because it sounds like the agent kind of had Russ's interest and best interest in mind, right? His perception around the league isn't great at the moment. It probably would help his stock if he stayed under Darvin Ham and kind of bought into this role everybody expected him to. But it sounds like Russ is not totally in favor of that. So I don't blame anyone for being surprised by this, because there's no really precedent of it happening.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, Russ had been really playing the role of a good soldier this offseason. He went to Darvin Ham's press conference. He apparently has been having long conversations and dinners with Darvin Ham. He was in Vegas were you there? Were you
No, I wasn't there, no.
By all appearances, from everyone there, reports, whatever, like Russ was really working with the team. And it makes me wonder now, like, how much of this was Russ really just trying to do the things that his agent was telling him you need to do, and Russ was doing it, reluctantly, because Russ can be extremely stubborn and proud and is not really big on adjusting. Or maybe he really did think he could have a fresh start with Darvin Ham, and the freeze out between him and LeBron just pushed it over to, it was like, F it, man, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm done. I'm not wanted.
Yeah, I mean, Russ has been around the league long enough to know when, again, he's also been traded, 4 straight seasons maybe. So he also knows when the writing is on the wall in terms of when he's going to be let go or has to find a new place to play. So some of this could be, again, posturing on his part, trying to get ahead of things and showing that he is a good teammate. And from all accounts, like throughout his career, that's been the MO with him, that he has been a good teammate. And throughout all of this, like, he's been pretty professional. With other players can easily, like, mid-season dropped some kind of leak or report to someone's, like, kind of airing some dirty laundry in there, but he didn't. And to his credit, he is just kind of like still posting things on Instagram, wearing Lakers gear. He isn't doing anything too cryptic. And besides this agent thing, he's been pretty quiet.
Has he done anything? I don't really use Instagram, and I don't follow him at all. Has he done anything recent? Like, I know he's been liking supportive tweets and stuff like that, but like, his Instagram seems pretty innocuous right now.
Yeah, it's just like his fashion stuff, tributes to his mom, like, again, like little workout stuff where he's in Lakers shorts, just like nothing too crazy. And again, like, he could have easily made this messy, but he hasn't.
So he's rising and grinding, is what you're saying.
Yes.
I mean, it's also, Jovan had a really, I thought, interesting, because we're talking about just right now the effect this is having on Russ's perception, that I thought this was a really great line. Westbrook is an ironclad first ballot Hall of Famer, but this is becoming one of the saddest post-prime superstar runs in NBA history. Like, Russ is not the most inherently likable player in the league by any stretch, and he can be his own worst enemy on this front, Alex, but like, it's rough to watch this. Like, watching a guy that was unquestionably great age this gracelessly and this awkwardly and with so many problems, this has become just absolutely unfathomable what's going on with Russ.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is going to be, if he gets traded or bought out or whatever this offseason, if he's gone from Lakers, his fourth, fifth different team in as many years. And that's just, again, never happens for a player of his caliber. And I think that speaks volumes to kind of the situation he's been in. And it's not like he's really, like on his end, he hasn't really changed his game, obviously. And that kind of hurts his game when everything else is evolving around him. He's kind of still the same Russ, and that's good and bad. And I think just within this modern game, if he can't shoot at his position, if he can't do the things, especially on a team that's trying to actively win, then he's not going to find a spot where on a team that has championship aspirations, because his flaws just kind of limit that.
Okay, you said something interesting there when you mentioned him not changing, and there's good and bad to it. What do you see as the good? Because the bad's been covered so much.
I still think he has a lot of positive skills on the court. Like, he still can break down a defense and get in the paint, probe, create these kind of 2-on-1 advantages where he finds guys in the corner. Still a quality passer. He's still great in transition. He's not the finisher he used to be. His shooting numbers around the rim are really poor. He doesn't actively try on the defensive end. And but in terms
no, he
of
does not.
Yeah, I think we saw the previous season with Washington, a formula that can still work in terms of his individual game. I'm not saying in terms of winning games, but in terms of him being optimized. If you have a bunch of shooters around him, you can run a lot of pick and roll. He has the ball a ton. Then he's going to put up numbers. He's going to make that team competitive. And that team made the playoffs almost entirely because of Westbrook.
Yeah.
So just that doesn't fit when you also have LeBron and AD and the lack of shooting. So it's just a bunch of kind of things that snowballed and made it hard for him.
Well, it also, though, gets to something Brian and I have emphasized a lot during the season, but especially in this off season. You'll hear people say, like fans or even media members, that if the Lakers can't work out a deal for Russ, they would be better off just not having him show up to training camp, just pay him to go away until they can eventually move him, or he sits out the whole season like John Wall just did in Houston, whatever. I don't think the Lakers can do that, because even with all of his flaws and bad fit for this team, he is easily in the upper half of talent on this roster. Like, it's not even close. They cannot afford to have a dead space on that roster without his skills. Like, they're not able to replicate that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think maybe that's where Darvin Ham has to come in and tinker and try to utilize him in a way that maybe Frank Vogel wasn't able to, or didn't get him to buy into. But number one, outside of LeBron, maybe Kendrick Nunn if he's healthy, they don't really have a traditional type point guard. So at the moment, Russ is their only point guard on the team that's going to bring the ball up, soak up that usage that LeBron has kind of clamored for the last 2-3 years. He doesn't want to do everything.
Yeah, he always doesn't want to do it until he wants to do it.
He always wants to do it, but at least
it's like with Kobe with Ramon Sessions. He was all excited about playing off ball, and a week and a half later, Ramon's in the corner.
So at some point, LeBron is going to revert back to just doing that. But at the same time, that just shows currently as constructed, the roster doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of just positional wise, in terms of skill wise. So that's where I would assume something with Russ has to go down.
Yeah, it's funny, watching this with Westbrook, I was thinking about, I'm a massive Allen Iverson fan. He's one of my all-time favorite players. And Iverson had a really rough aging transition and really refused to make adjustments to extend his career. He wanted to be AI forever. And there's a lot of similarities with this and Russ. And it just reminded me how much context, personal attachment to a player, personal attachment to a team will shape your viewing on this. Because for me, watching AI stubbornly refuse to do anything else, I could see how he was hurting his own career. But there was a part of me that felt like that's AI doing it his way. He is not going to be anything other than himself. And even if there's an element of self-destruction to it, I can respect it. And maybe it's because I just was that big of an AI fan, or maybe it's because Iverson had been easier to root for over the course of his career because he's a little guy against big guys, or just he doesn't hurt my team, so it doesn't matter to me. It can be more fascinating to watch. The optics of seeing Russ do it feel more irritating or even depressing than Allen Iverson in the exact same situation.
Yeah, no, that's a great kind of comparison. I mean, that's the thing with Russ. Like that's always what's always been so intriguing about him. It's like you see this guy from afar as a Laker fan or as people who've been Laker fans who've watched him with the Thunder specifically. You see this guy from afar who's just like this insane competitor. Obviously, the numbers have always been like flashy, the triple doubles, all that stuff. But besides all that, like he's a guy who during that whole KD thing, he stayed. Like he knew they probably weren't going to win, but he still stayed. He like there is a little bit of like you said, kind of a little bit of heroism there that you can kind of just admire from afar. But then once you see it up close, then you kind of realize that there's no rewiring that's going to happen here. Like this is a guy who's been what he's always been, and the reason he has done that is because he's found success doing that. He's won an MVP. He's been multiple time All-Star. So it's really hard to get those guys to kind of change their stripes. Where for 80% of their career, 90% of their career, it's worked doing it their way. And that's why it's just really hard to just plug in any guy and assume they're going to change. And I think that's like, I was like guilty of that. I thought he was going to make some alterations to his game, but it's a lot easier said than done.
Oh yeah. I will never forget during the year of the Kobe Powell, Nash, Dwight super team, like a month and a half into the season, talking with Antoine Jameson, and he was very candid about this, and he included himself among the people he was talking about when he just said, like, yeah, everybody underestimated how difficult the required sacrifices would be. He's like, myself included. We all thought it would be way easier than it was. All right, there's obviously going to be a lot more happening with Russ and this team. I don't think it's going to solve itself by the time this pod drops, but I want to shift gears coming back and talk about the Lakers in Summer League, because they had a really high-profile team, and you were able to actually see more of it than I was because of this move. So I want to get some of your impressions on that. We'll get into that next. Cole Swider, he's become, I don't know, the new hero of the Summer League, the new hero for fans who are really excited by watching this guy shoot. His shot is absolutely gorgeous. The Lakers put out on Twitter a montage of all of his threes made during Summer League, and like it's just textbook. From your impression of him in the Summer League, because I'm seeing already a lot of fans saying that the Lakers should give him a regular roster spot, like manipulate his contract so he's on the big club. Do you think he's ready for that? If so, why? If not, why? What would need to change? Like, what were your general impressions of him?
Really impressed. Like coming into the draft, that was the big thing, right? He called himself the best shooter in the draft before he was went undrafted. So I seeing it like from a game to game basis, the shot's legit. And what's crazy is like you see that he shot 50% from three in Summer League, and I would say most of those were contested or pretty deep or in transition, coming off movement, and those are usually the harder ones to make. So to see him kind of like from day one make the difficult ones and have no hesitation, this guy like pulls up with the guy in his face. He's a legit shooter. So I get the appeal from Laker fans, obviously with a team who lacks shooting as much as they do. I just worry about the defense, and he does have good height, good size, and stuff like that. But at the next level, I can see him being possibly a liability. And there's not a lot of off the dribble game. He's mostly just primarily a shooter. But you would assume that with a LeBron AD team, that's all he would need to be anyway.
Did you see any evidence of him being able to do more than spotting up? Like maybe it's not his strength yet, but like little glimpses of what he might be able to do offensively beyond just spacing the floor for essentially stationary.
Yeah, there were some cool moments where like the defense would lock and trail him, right? They would chase him around screens, and they would kind of cover him so tightly that he actually was able to like back cut a couple times. And that's usually what like JJ Redick was obviously really good at that. Rip Hamilton was really good at that. So when you're as good of a shooter as you are, and you can kind of use that gravity and use that kind of threat to your advantage and kind of set the defense up to kind of back cut last second. I can see that being really useful, like with LeBron at the top of the key and running him off screens and then him kind of back cut to the basket. stuff like that. So he does have a couple like counters, but I wouldn't say he has like a ton of game outside of the shot.
A lot of focus on the defensive liabilities and what could potentially happen to him against NBA offenses targeting him. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like prime Ron Artest, 1 being Jason Capono on crutches. Like what would you say his defense looks like right now? Like did it seem to you as bad as people were worried about?
I didn't say no. I don't think he was horrible. I just think obviously there probably is going to be limitations there. I think he's like a good enough rebounder for his position, and he played mostly like power forward. Like again, he has some good height on him. It's not like he's going to like be posted up every possession or anything. He has at least kind of size and stuff like that. I just worry at the next level, and that's with any rookie, honestly, that there's going to be an adjustment period. He's probably going to have to work on his body and stuff like that. But I think to really get the most value out of him, you have to kind of put enough defensive help around him, and then put him in a position where you have passers like a Westbrook, like a LeBron, who really can set him up. Because again, I didn't really see a lot of open shots for him. So if he's doing this against on difficult looks, I think he's going to be pretty good at the next level.
You actually set up well my next question. Do you think the Lakers have enough there that they could basically cover for him? Like, I'm not saying over the course of a whole game, he's not going to play an entire game, but for, 10-minute stretches, 12-minute stretches, do you think the Lakers could actually cover for him enough to benefit from his shooting?
I think that's the thing. I think if you're going to play him in any, I'm guessing bench units or with like LeBron, second quarter stints that he usually starts, your goal is probably just to outscore the other team. I don't think you're going into trying to like stop them or kind of limit their scoring. It's more we're just going to outscore you. And we saw that with like Malik Monk. I think he's a good like kind of proxy to that. Whereas those second units and his net rating were actually pretty solid just because they were so good on offense that it made up for the defense. So I think that's probably going to be his closest route to kind of success, is just putting him in these kind of all offense units and stuff like that. But besides like wing help, there's not a lot there. Point of the attack help, there's not a lot there. You're kind of hoping AD kind of cleans up all the mistakes on the back end.
Sort of the inverse of Cole Swider was Max Christie, where you could really see the defensive potential there. I mean, even some of the defensive skills already arrived, but the shot wasn't there. I've seen a lot of Laker fans already worried that Christie was not worth selecting, was not worth purchasing a pick in order to select. What did you see in him, and what made you most optimistic? What were some of the things that, if at all, have you concerned?
In terms of optimistic, like you said, the defense, I was really impressed. I thought he was a better defender than I thought he was, because if you look at him, he's very thin. He's kind of lanky. He's just kind of, you can tell he's a rookie coming out of college who needs to kind of a year or two to kind of blossom into like his body and stuff like that. And every night he was given the toughest assignment on the other team. That was what Coach Ott said, that every night he did really good against Keegan Murray. That game that they played the Kings, although Keegan Murray scored like almost 30 points, almost all of that, like I clipped it, almost all of that came when Max Christie wasn't guarding him or when he was on the bench. So even with his like body still kind of rounding out, he has really great instincts on that end, really great wingspan, I think like 6'10" or something like that. So the defensive tools, I totally get why they selected him where they did. Offensively, like you said, the shot wasn't there. I think he shot like 22% from three. His aggression was better in those later games, but early on, he was really scared to kind of do anything outside of just catch and shoot. So he's definitely going to be a work in progress. And I get the hesitation, or kind of when you see other kind of players drafted around him doing a lot better probably. But I guess my only concern is that they signed him to a 2-year deal.
Right.
And you're not going to get Max Christie's total value in 2 years. I think if you're investing in him or wanting to see the upside, you need a longer deal than that.
Well, it's what the Lakers do. It seems to be their MO is to they go with these second round or undrafted guys on short-term deals. It's a whole other clutch conversation.
Caruso, THT, Austin Reeves, hopefully not. Like there is a few concerns here in terms of that element of
and it always seems in one way or another to benefit a clutch client. directly, indirectly. Yeah. Again, another conversation for another day. What do you think of Jay Huff?
I like Jay Huff. I honestly, if it, he did contract COVID and was unfortunately unable to play most of those games, but in the games he did, he was easily probably the best player on the court, I would say, in a lot of those games. I thought he was really solid with South Bay last season. He got a call up. Didn't get a ton of minutes with the Lakers though, but I thought he looked a lot more polished defensively. I thought his rim protection was pretty impressive. I thought that was an issue where he kind of struggled with in the G League. But if he can show that he can protect the rim and also convert from three at the level he did in Summer League, that's like a traditional pick and pop big that they've lacked for quite a bit here.
Last thing before we go, did you get any impression from what you saw them running on the Summer League team that you think might translate over to what they actually do when training camp opens and the season opens, or any hints of what you think Darvin Ham may want to do with the big club?
Just stylistically, I thought like the Summer League Lakers in terms of athleticism kind of reflects what their approach was this offseason. They did a lot of running. Scottie Pippen Jr., who we haven't mentioned, I thought did a great job.
I liked him.
Picking up pace, tempo. He always kind of probed the paint. He'd always kind of go downhill and set up his shooters and stuff like that. So I can see the Lakers kind of trying to replicate that. Like during the offseason, the player introductions, like Troy Brown Jr. and other guys mentioned how big of an emphasis speed is going to be, playing fast. And that's what this Summer League team did. And just going back to Jay Huff, Darvin Ham has said he wants to play a lot of 4 out, 1 in. And obviously to do that, if you have AD being the 1 in, you're going to need your big opposite him to also be able to space it. That's why Thomas Bryant made sense. That's why Jay Huff was pretty effective in this role. So there's a little bit of hints here and there that this team, probably on purpose, intentionally, was built the way it was in Summer League to kind of put those things in practice.
Alex Regla, you can read his work over at Silver Screen and Roll. Catch the podcast on Tuesdays, Taco Tuesday, part of the great staff over at Silver Screen and Roll. They do great Lakers coverage across the board. Alex, thank you very much, man, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Always great honor being here. As a big fan of this pod growing up, and of you and Brian. So awesome. Thank you, man.
Appreciate that, even though you're totally aging me in a way that's kind of depressing. Again, make sure you're subscribing to Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, that you're subscribing to the podcast itself. Follow us on Twitter at Cam Brothers. Also, shopdoer.com for Doers clothes. Use the code LOCKEDON15. The store in LA, 170 South La Brea. And we will see everybody on Wednesday.